A museum is a place to find out about history, about culture, but a museum is also a place to find out about one's faith journey and the faith journey of a community. Stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue as we talk about a local museum.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you've joined us today on Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm your host, Sandy Wilder, and our conversation today is with Bernadette Pfeiffer, who's director of the Carver Museum here in Austin. Well, welcome, Bernadette.
It's
good to have you.
to be here.
Talk a little bit about what the Carver is. Let's set the stage for people watching, because some people may not have ever heard of the museum. What is the Carver Museum? What's its purpose?
Well, first let me give you a little history about the Carver Museum. It is Austin's, it's in a building that was Austin's first library building. It's just 1,800 square feet, but the facility was first built downtown, and then it was moved to the site where it sits today. The museum itself is dedicated to the history of African Americans. In fact, our museum is the first African American museum in the state of Texas. We have that distinction, so we're very proud of that distinction. It is a museum which, of course, celebrates African American history and culture, primarily of Austin, Travis County, then Texas, then national. We present exhibits, and we also present fine art exhibits also, and historical. We are primarily an historical facility, and we have a lot of community outreach also.
Now, is the museum then privately run, or is it something under the auspices of a group or a company?
Yes, in fact, you know, the museum, even though it celebrates African American history, each one of us in this community own a little bit of the facility. It's a municipal facility. It's owned by the city.
And tell us a little bit about your journey. A museum director position is an interesting place to have ended up. How did you happen to get there?
Interestingly, I moved here directly from El Paso, and came to Texas from Washington, D.C., but always loved the arts, very interested in my personal history. And when I moved to Austin, found myself originally on the board of the Carver Museum, and later coming as its director and curator.
What a wonderful opportunity to make an impact on the community.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about some of the things here, and then we'll move into conversation about the Bible. But what else have you brought today?
Well, you know, what I brought here are things that basically symbolic items that not only represent African American history, but could be your history, could be anybody's history that is out there looking at us today. Books that celebrate our history, tell us about who we are and where we came from. I think it's important not only for the African American, but anyone. And when I speak of the number of things, certainly in anyone's history, there are those types of things too. Just representative things from Africa, African carvings, a book about black folk from Texas, and the old rag doll. This is a book, a first edition book from Up From Slavery, a very renowned book from Booker T. Washington. And one of the things that is very interesting that is also a tradition in black history is the quilt. And there are a number of, well, you know, European may say, well, we have a grand history of quilt making also. Well, so do Africans and African Americans have a grand history of quilt making. We put on a glorious exhibit of African American quilts. Generally every 2 years we put on a quilt exhibit at the museum.
Does that include 97, or did we miss it for this year?
Haven't missed it for this year. In fact, it's due in March.
Oh, good, good. We'll know to look for that. Before I forget, should folks want to contact the museum about its hours and what's on exhibit and all, I know we've got the telephone number and we want to be sure to get that up too, so
Great.
people can definitely be in touch with you. How do these things come to the museum?
They come through the museum by donations. Either people have started collections, and I don't know about you, Sandy, but I'm certainly a hoarder. I collect a number of things. And even as children, we collect things. We may have a little cigar box or shoe box that we start collecting things. And over the years, people have collections that they are interested in sharing with others, or their family members are not interested in carrying that particular exhibit on. So we ask them to share it with us. Oftentimes, the museum does not own a lot of the things that we exhibit. We ask that the community share with us their collections. The museum itself does own collections of African American art. We own collections of African artifacts, books, and a number of memorabilia from the community. But a number of our larger exhibits that we do have, we, so to say, put a call out to the community of those persons who have collections who would be interested in sharing it with the community at large.
I like that approach, because then the Carver is not just a repository, let's say, for historical items, but is also a place for living collections, showing that items that people have now have just as much value as historical pieces.
Definitely. And it's also a place for friend making and really,
how so?
Really community building, because, for an example, last year we had a glorious exhibit of African American dolls. And there are numerous doll collectors in this community, but beyond. The primary contributor to that exhibit with 300 dolls was a doll collector out of Waco, Texas. But and knowing that there's a large community of doll makers here, they wanted to see that collection. And then those persons who are called, like myself, a closet doller, who collect dolls and don't say you really are, you know, doing it, would come and they're interested in viewing them. But generally when you're viewing them, you find someone who has that particular doll, and you find a connection with that person, and conversations start. It's really a glorious experience, you know, and it's across, the interest is not looking at me as a black person or you as a European, you know, it is just the interest is there, and it's a building of friendships.
Right, right. Building around universal experiences like collecting dolls. Okay, what kinds of things is the museum looking at doing in, say, the next several months, besides the quilt exhibit in March?
Well, in March, we, of course, are going to do the quilt exhibit, and are looking for even more African American persons who have been in quilt making to participate. In May, we generally do an exhibit of children photography. It is an outreach program that we have had for the past, going into our 7th year. And We have 60 kids that we lend them cameras, 35 millimeter cameras, and the name of the project is A Smile on My Face. It's to show the positive aspects of life, and you looking at an old weathered building may not see the beauty in it, but he who takes the picture may definitely see beauty in it. And so in May, we have that exhibit of the children's work. And then after that, that particular exhibit goes out on tour. In fact, right now, it is at the municipal building downtown on 8th Street. And then the summer brings about a really exciting exhibit that we will start probably the week before Juneteenth. And it is a celebration of Texas music. And it's called Rags to Rap, and ragtime music to rap music. And we will be doing and celebrating those participants, Texas participants, in that discipline of music.
And there's stuff to hear, I assume, as well as things to look at.
Yes, oh, definitely. So it's, you know, auditory and visual.
And what else then for the rest of the year? Let's really whet people's excitement.
Oh boy, for the rest of the year, in general, we go not necessarily to the calendar year. Our fiscal year ends in September, so we will have a visual art, a fine art exhibit at that time.
Okay. So there's always something going on at the Carver, and it sounds as if you welcome suggestions from the community, too, of things that folks would like to see.
Oh, definitely. You know, oftentimes people believe that because, again, that we're African-American, an African-American museum, that we only celebrate African-American experiences. Generally, once a year, we try to celebrate another ethnic group traditions, because as I was explaining to you earlier, I truly believe, and I think the ideology of the Carver is for you to know me and my traditions and heritage, and for you and for me to know you and the things that you experience. So we bring that into the museum and let those persons from the community experience that too.
And I suppose the museum also hosts meetings and workshops and such like that from time to time. Meeting,
workshops, performances. In fact, in March, we're going to have the chamber music. We will have a concert of chamber music. So it is really a holistic approach, and the idea of community is not just the boundaries of, say, East Austin. It is the whole community experiencing it and celebrating the whole community. So if I were to ask you what a typical day is like at the Carver, there would be no typical day, right? Right. It's just project to project to project and opportunity to opportunity, isn't it? Certainly, and we do have numerous opportunities, and what I say standard opportunities, like we know we're going to do certain workshops, and we know we're going to do the photography, the children will be there, and we also have an outreach of African folk tales, and we have storytellers to go into schools and some church groups and tell folk tales, African folk tales, and African American folk tales. So we know those things are going to happen. Right. We have a system in that I go out and do what we call Museum in a Basket. And the Museum in a Basket, we have 4 themes for those. We talk about George Washington Carver, whom the museum is named for, and we talk about Austin, Black history, pioneers in Austin, and we talk about the Middle Passage, how slaves came over and the hardships of it, and we also talk about African Americans in general, national figures that people either know about and some that they don't know about. More wealth than we knew existed. Oh, exactly. We'll come back for some more conversation in just a minute. Stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue for the second half of the conversation with Bernadette Pfeiffer.
We've been talking about the central role a museum plays in a community's history and in people's history. Talking with Bernadette Pfeiffer, director of the Carver Museum here in Austin. And Bernadette, I want to ask you this time about, it's literally central here on the display, but also central in people's lives, the role of a Bible, particularly a Bible in the history of African American people as reflected in the museum. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, the Bible was generally the first item that people, the slaves, learned. They learned to read from the Bible. Excuse me. And in learning to read from the Bible, of course, they established their morals, their ground stay. And from that, I like to think of the Bible as being a little museum, really, because I think that oftentimes museums derive a lot of their information that is used, especially African Americans, museums derive a lot of their information that is received and researched from the Bible.
And how does that happen?
History is put into the Bible. All of the births, all of the celebrations, important events of the families, some little tidbits that we don't necessarily think are important, but when you had certain childhood diseases and all of those types of things were put into family Bibles and really gives you a history of community, a history certainly of a family, but a history too of community, because there may also be things in the Bible like Papa started his business at this particular time, this date and time, and how they acquired their money in a particular family, things like that.
People actually then wrote on the pages of the Bibles.
Some wrote, of course, in the pages of Bible, but generally there was a section in the Bible where this history could be placed, and generally it was in the front of the Bible, and they would go traditionally to that section and write down those types of things.
And this particular Bible that you brought today, what's the significance of this book?
This particular book is one of a number of Bibles that were donated to the museum. It is 118 years old, and we have a number of Bibles that are older than that. So putting that kind of history into the information, if one has written into that, we go back in this particular Bible 118 years, finding out who the people were in a community, where they lived, how they lived, is very important.
And for this particular volume then, did it come from someone locally, and so you can say trace their family tree back that 118 years?
And it was one of those items that, like I said before, oftentimes families who have their family member has passed on, and younger members really don't feel they have a need for the particular item or items, then they donate it to the museum, or they may see the value, and which I think is very important, the value of the community knowing about their individual family and the traditions of truly the community at that particular time.
If you were to consider the various items that the museum has in its collection, not just the Bible, but the whole range of things, what else might you be able to tell about, say, the faith history of the people who donated these items? What else might you be able to tell from what it was they saved, how their faith was important to them, or church-going practices, or whatever?
Photographs. Very interesting photographs about them attending church, and we have a wide selection of photographs reaching over a number of years. So that tells a story, an interesting story about also their dress. We have donated dresses and shoes of items that they would wear. You know, we might see a picture and then can relate that to. It truly does, and I can't emphasize enough, tell really does give it a description of not only the family, sometimes an individual, but the community, and what it felt about the individual and what it felt about really the whole community.
And when we talk about community, in the case of the Carver, are the items primarily from the Austin or Central Texas area, or do your items really come from farther afield? Who's reflected in what you've got?
And in our mission, it is our mission to reflect the African American from the Austin, Travis County, the Central Texas area. So that's what we're primarily looking at. We have very few items that have been donated from, say, the entire region of Texas, primarily Central Texas, Austin area.
So we've got some history buffs too. What a wonderful place to go and do some searching about what life was like, maybe how family members used to live here in the Austin area.
Definitely. We also house an archives. We save information on, and sometimes you may say, well, I'm just Bernadette Pfeiffer. I'm nobody in the community. But oftentimes there is a little article here. You may have been given this award, or we save information like that that you may not think that's important, but that type of information makes our community the type of a community that it is. So we save those kinds of things. And people who we call the legends of our community, we also save information about them.
Oral histories, you mean?
Not only oral histories, we have oral histories. We're going into video histories now, of course, but on paper, we have information, research on different individuals who are considered legends within the community.
What difference do you think it makes with the Carver being such a rich source of information? What difference do you think it makes to the Austin community that the Carver exists?
Oh, I think you're asking the wrong person, because I get up on my high horse and really celebrate it. This community has really been given a treasure. When I said earlier that we were the first African American museum in the state of Texas, and you have a gym in the Carver Museum, not just because I work there, but the facility itself, the historical significance of the facility itself, but knowing that information has been saved, is being gathered so that a people's history can be celebrated. And I'm one of those people who believe truly in the truth. And I say a museum should equal truth. And so in saving information, whether we look back on a community and we see the things weren't so positive, we need to tell that story along with celebrating all of the glorious things that come into the community. So we need to tell the whole story of a community.
The museum then reflects the whole of a community's spirit, if you will, as well as just the historical record, right?
Oh, definitely.
If you were going to, say, in the next couple of years, make some changes to the Carver to help it carry out its mission and that spirit better, what kinds of things might you dream for the museum?
Oh, I dream hard and I dream deep, Sandy. One of the things that the museum needs desperately is we need more space. We're bursting at the seams for space. We are just 1,800 square feet, the museum itself. Our gallery space is 1,400, and we have no storage. And so when I tell you these little tidbits, it's only just a little portion of telling you the limits that are on us.
Right.
Because the things that you see here, if you had a collection and decided that you wanted to donate it to us, I'd have to really consider whether I had the proper storage for the collection before I could accept the collection. And that's important for us. One of the things that we do and believe very much in is, and I think that it's a part of our mission, is service, and that service is outreach. We have, classes and workshops and a lot of interaction of coming in and out of the community people where they can have classes there, where that a lot of the artists who are in this community can celebrate their talents on an ongoing basis, not just a limited, and where we can have not only rotating exhibit, changing exhibits, but also have permanent exhibits where at all times you can come and you can see some of these things. Now we're in a situation where we have to, like I said earlier, change out exhibits from month to month, or we've gotten into basically a 2 or 3 month cycle now.
Yeah, you really are limited on space. So space at this point would be your primary dream.
Space is my primary thing, and staff would be the next. I think they probably go hand in hand. There are 2 of us at the Carver right now. We always are interested in volunteers and to help us out. But, if I were dreaming and knowing that it would be coming true, those would be some of the 2 primary things that I would be looking for.
And I wonder then, folks watching today and excited about your mission, if you could say just very briefly how folks might help you with the work.
Certainly. Of course, volunteering in kind and monetarily with any particular project that we may be doing, or just volunteering or donating any type of funds. We accept donations, and there are no limits on the donations that are given to, it may be for a particular event, or it may be open, maybe in our education program, go toward our education program, or towards some equipment, a new camera, or maybe a new video camera. Those are the types of things that we need at the Carver.
Lots of opportunities, because there's lots of richness here already. Thank you, Bernadette. We appreciate the conversation. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on Austin Faith Dialogue.